doing is we're just going to go and give a bit of a preview for everyone at home to check out the overall match, current scores and results between Indonesia and Egypt. And we've got them on screen right now.
We have indeed, and good to see Indonesia doing well this week. They had a little bit of an unfortunate week one, going unfortunately 0-8 against their last week opponents.
Yes.
But nice to see them coming back with 5 victories, and a little bit more standard stuff coming out from the Indonesian team. Really some fun stuff coming out from Egypt too. Really liking seeing that Rayquaza and Tyranitar coming out from Peter there from Egypt's team. Nice little mix of restricteds there. Mostly Zacians coming in, but nice to see that pairing with Zacian across the board has been different. Seeing some Calyrex Shadow Rider, seeing some Kyogre, seeing some Groudon, and good to see that sort of variation coming into this match.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think even though, of course, we do see that the results are quite clear for at least this week too, Indonesia has already successfully picked up the win versus Egypt, as they are 5-0 and there's a total of 8 matches. But of course, do not let that take any sort of excitement away from this match, because quite literally, every single win matters. It's all about being able to make sure that you have enough of a differential state to be able to still be in favor of going ahead and promoting yourself, going into the next stage, of course. And from Egypt's side, apologies. Last week, they did actually lose 5-3 to Canada. It is quite tough for them to be able to pull it back. But of course, that will be left to be seen if there is any sort of scenario that they try to go for and be able to get that sort of qualification to the next stage.
Yeah, indeed. And you're absolutely right, Costa. Even for the teams that are doing well, it's so important to just keep pushing and keep getting those wins in, keep raising your differential, because you just never know what's going to happen in the other teams' matches in the week, and you just never know quite how it's going to work out. So every one of those wins is absolutely crucial. But speaking of wins, we've got to pick a winner for our first match between these two countries, Egypt and Indonesia, and we'll see their player profiles coming up on your screen. So Dina on the left, playing for Egypt. Couple of achievements here: Hatterene Series 1 top 16 and Hatterene Series 3 top 16. A grassroots online event that is really quite tough. A lot of good competition within that tournament. So really good qualifications there from Dina. And Hafidz is a really well-decorated player in their own region. Singapore Open finalists, Kuala Lumpur Regional Top 8 Championships, and getting a invitation to play in the World Championships, of course, in the 2021 season.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see a match between these two players as well, because we got Dina, which is a community leader in SoCal, so she's got a bit of experience when it comes to sort of management and assisting with regards to community, and try to get positive vibes going around everybody and make sure that everyone's still engaged, still excited going into this. And then we've got Hafidz over on the Indonesian side, which they're managers. They've been manager of Indonesia for the past 2 years of World Cup. So, and my lord, we just saw a bit of a sneak peek of what both trainers are going to be bringing. And to say the least, I am definitely intrigued from Hafidz's side of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's some restricted Pokemon in this format that are really quite common. Zacian, Kyogre, Groudon, Calyrex, Shadow Rider, probably the main 4 Pokemon. And I don't know, Costa, they just seem to be missing here from this matchup, and that's really nice to see. As it stands, Calyrex, Ice Rider, and Palkia, alongside that Incineroar, Amoonguss, Tapu Fini, and Porygon 2, are a really solid core. Had a really good showing in quite a few tournaments, especially in the North American region. So not surprising to see Dina being a comfort pick, and especially since Dina actually used the same team last week and was able to beat Canada's own Ryan, who is otherwise known as Sableye VGC, and very good player to take a win off, especially 2-0 as well. So yeah, coming into the match here, we're going straight ahead. We see that Eldegoss and Solgaleo and Porygon 2 and Incineroar coming out.
Yeah, and very interesting lead as well. We've got the Intimidate being, of course, affected onto that Eldegoss, but because of Solgaleo's ability of the clear body, or in this case, the full metal body, it is not going to be affected by that at all. So we've got a bit of a potential Trick Room setup from Dina's side, whilst over on Hafidz, I'm not sure what the strategy is, but it may be a cheeky little thing that a Japanese player was able to do quite successfully with in last month's ladder.
Yeah, it certainly could be. I mean, the thing that's going to be really interesting to see here is whether Dina has got that a little bit of information, seeing that team becoming publicly available or not. As it stands, Foul Play sitting there from the Porygon 2 is going to be putting on a lot of pressure to Solgaleo, which is quite difficult to do. Solgaleo is one of those Pokemon that, because you can't lower its stats, because you can't use those Max Darkness or Max Phantasms so successfully against it because of that full metal body, can't lower its stats, that makes it really difficult to take down, especially when it, as right now, can go for its Dynamax form, launch out Max Quakes, launch out Max Steel Spikes, and raise those defenses even further.
Yeah, and we're going to be seeing a helping hand now coming out from the Eldegoss, which of course means it's going to be able to completely avoid this Fake Out, which does have a lower priority on the priority bracket. And of course, we do actually see the interaction of the Cotton Down, not affecting the Solgaleo, but definitely dropping the speed of both that Incineroar and the Porygon 2. And we've got a Rockfall going into the Incineroar slot and absolutely knocking it straight out of this game one. Oh my lord, I've lost my words right now because but yeah, I think in this situation though, the Porygon 2 might not mind this because it's going for a Trick Room, which of course means it's going to be taking advantage of that drop speed.
Yeah, effectively raising the speed. The Max Rockfall's so good, mostly because the Incineroars, and you can see it on your screen there, tend to carry that Shuka Berry, does half damage from any sort of ground type attack. So Hafidz going for a rock type move, bypassing the Shuka Berry, also being able to knock out the the Incineroar on Dina's side of the field, and it's a little bit of a question mark as to me as to whether or not knocking out that Incineroar was a good thing, because the Solgaleo isn't going to be affected by the Intimidate. That makes pretty much half of what Incineroar's trying to do not very effective. That Intimidate not able to lower Solgaleo's attack stats and not able to suppress it at all. And of course, now Dina has the momentum swing by getting that Calyrex Ice Rider in and being able to launch off big powerful attacks into the Solgaleo. A combination of Foul Play, taking advantage of how powerful Solgaleo's attack stat is, as well as Calyrex potentially in its Dynamax form, bringing out some big Max Quakes onto Hafid's side of the field, might be just enough for Dina to take a really influential knockout here.
Well, exactly that, because you're able to capitalize off of the momentum now that you are in Trick Room, hopefully, but then it is a bit tough for this Calyrex going up against this mammoth of a Solgaleo as well, which of course has that steel typing. So this may even force Dina's hand into going for perhaps a Max Quake, as we did see the Urshifu switching in right now. So the Eldegoss, maybe Hafidz is expecting a Max Hailstorm into that slot to allow Calyrex to kind of profit off of that, get a +1 in its attack due to its Chilling Neigh, but we're actually going to be seeing a Foul Play coming up from the Porygon 2, goes into that Urshifu Rapid Strike, which of course is that water typing, and that being the case, it will be able to resist this move and survive this turn as well, as the Hail Weather has now been set up, and we're just waiting for Solgaleo to take its turn.
Yeah, really good turn there for Hafidz. Taking a knockout turn one, that's pretty good, but hey, maybe not the best momentum swing that you can have. Now switching in his Urshifu, making sure he's taking that damage, making sure that Calyrex isn't getting a knockout, and also getting a lot of damage onto that Porygon 2 with a Max Steel Spike. You take a little bit of Hail Chip damage for it, but so does Porygon 2. And now I really do think that Dina's in a really sticky spot. That Calyrex on the field usually would be threatening with something like a Glacial Lance that hits both of the opposing Pokemon, but now that Calyrex is in its Dynamax form, it can only hit one Pokemon at a time, and that gives Hafidz a lot of space, especially with Porygon 2 on the field that's not really known for taking any quick knockouts, to attack a little bit more freely. And even while we're in Trick Room and Dina's Pokemon are going first, with that Max Steel Spike boost coming out from the Solgaleo's Max Steel Spike, it's just going to be able to attack really freely.
Yeah, exactly that. And we're seeing Hafidz taking more of a sort of defensive approach, expecting Dina's potential play there. Switches the Ho-Oh in. Urshifu is now in the back. Foul play goes into the Solgaleo. Doesn't actually do as much damage as you'd expect due to that Max Steel Spike boosting its defenses up to +1. Max Quake combination. Doesn't even shrug any sort of sweat on the Solgaleo, my lord. It just took it as if it was just such a champ and it was resisting everything. But no, those were super effective moves, ladies and gents, which allows the Max Steel Spike to go into the Porygon 2 slot, pick up the KO, and all of a sudden, Dina has 2 final remaining Pokemon left.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too little too late coming from Dina here. That you know, you're trying to, with this Calyrex, Ice Rider, Palkia team, you're trying to get into Trick Room fairly quickly. Dina managed that fantastically, getting into Trick Room on the first turn, even getting the momentum switch, bringing that Calyrex in. But you have to start taking knockouts really, really quickly when you're playing this sort of team while you're under Trick Room, because if you get to the end of Trick Room and your Pokemon are just not going to quite do enough damage, they're not going to take the knockouts, then you're really going to struggle when Trick Room's over. As it stands, we've got 2 more turns of Trick Room left, so there is a little bit of hope, especially since Dina did go for the Dynamax 1 turn later than Hafidz, and is now able, probably, alongside the Palkia, to knock out this Solgaleo this turn. There is a Ho-Oh on the field for Hafidz that has brought in, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on the Calyrex. But while this Trick Room's up, Dina still has the advantage in who's going to go first, and her Pokemon are going to do more damage.
Yeah, they definitely will, and we made a point a bit about the Trick Room momentum. I feel like perhaps Palkia could have been a route for Dynamaxing, and maybe if you could try to position yourself to the point where you have Calyrex in its normal form, just going for the Glacial Lances, deal a bit of chip damage over time. But we're just going to be seeing this Max Calyrex go for the Max Quake, not quite enough to pick up the KO on this Solgaleo, it being able to survive on a very small slither of HP there, as the Max Quake is going to be boosting special defenses. Both sides, we see Sacred Fire coming out, actually picking up a burn and revealing a Life Orb, as the Solgaleo goes for the Psychic Fangs, nearly bringing Palkia down to half of its HP's worth, as the Palkia goes for the Hydro Pump into that Ho-Oh slot, and yes, it is going to be more than enough to pick up the KO and knock the Fiery Bird out of Game 1.
Yeah, that's a really big turn there for Dina. Interesting that the Palkia went after the Solgaleo and the Ho-Oh, so actually when Dina comes out of Trick Room, Dina's going to have a Pokemon that's going to be outspeeding at least some of the threats on Hafid's side of the field. Of course, that Ho-Oh being quickly dispatched by the Hydro Pump is fantastic for Dina. There is this Cotton Down ability that we saw right at the start of the game that is going to be a little bit problematic to deal with, but of course, if you get the Glacial Lance into the Eldegoss this turn, Cotton Down activates, Palkia gets a speed drop, and then becomes effectively faster than Solgaleo this turn. So there's definitely a lot of ways here that Dina can take advantage of this turn and the delayed Dynamax from the previous few turns to take a win here.
Ooh, as we're going to be seeing the Glacial Lance coming out right now, goes and picks up a double KO. And you know what time it is? It's time for Cotton Down first, which is upping the speed of both the Palkia and the Calyrex Shadow. Ice Rider. And then, of course, we have to be seeing the Chilling Neigh ability. Boost up and allow this absolute juggernaut of a Pokemon, a fusion Pokemon, going up to +2 of its attack.
Yeah, and now it's really going to be difficult for Hafidz to do anything with the remaining Urshifu. We saw it take quite a lot of damage on the switch in before. Palkia's only fully accurate move is to go for a flamethrower that we just saw. Maybe there's another move there that we haven't seen yet, or I haven't noticed on the screen that we're seeing right now. So, you know, potentially if you protected this turn, wasted out the last turn of Trick Room if you're Fahid, then you could go for an attack into Calyrex, pick up a knockout, maybe Palkia doesn't quite pick up the KO, and then you can finish off the Palkia with a close combat. But there's a lot to ask here, and certainly, you know, it's going to be difficult because you can't use that strong close combat with the ability to take a critical hit, because if you do that, then the flamethrower is almost guaranteed to knock out the Urshifu.
Oh, as the close combat isn't even enough to pick up the KO on Calyrex Ice Rider, unfortunately for Hafidz there, as we're going to be seeing the defense and special defense drop, but this spatial rend does connect. I think Hafidz was hoping for a miss there that needed to be in with some sort of win condition for them to be able to get run away with this game 1 win. But no, Dina, after everything, after the Trick Room being set up originally where we felt like there wasn't that much of an offensive pressure coming out from their side, she was able to just plow through essentially and get that game 1 win. And I think Palkia coming in at that time as well just proved that Dina was able to have that additional offensive pressure to be able to just force onto Hafidz's side, even though Hafidz's the speed was actually slower in comparison to Palkia.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting interactions that we've had here. I mean, really what it came down to in that game was that Dynamax of the Solgaleo going 1 turn before the Calyrex, because we saw how little damage that Solgaleo really took from the foul play and the Max Quake coming from the Calyrex. That's a lot of damage, really. There's not a lot of damage to a Max Pokemon, and Solgaleo is really taking it like a champ. But what happened was, when the Solgaleo went into its normal form, it took effectively more damage because it had less health to have it at its availability, and that just enough to be able to take the win for Dina there. If that Solgaleo wasn't knocked out, when it was, then Dina would have had a really uphill battle, I think.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's all about timing as well, and trying to manage the Dynamax mechanic as much as possible with regards to, like the current board state, and if you can actually afford to lose any more damage or not, or just bulk out any sort of attacks coming from your opponent. But we're just going to be seeing the same leads from both of these trainers, Ben.
We are, and I'm quite interested to see how this turn goes, right? Because, we see the same Pokemon on the field. We see that Solgaleo and Eldegoss. We see the Incineroar and the Porygon 2. Your question here is does Hafidz go straight for the Dynamax again? Does he go for the knockout on Incineroar? Does he instead go for maybe a Max Steel Spike, start raising up the defenses of that Solgaleo 1 turn earlier? And maybe that makes an impact in the later game. Do you maybe get a little bit of Max Quake boost going on instead, and just accept that you're not going to be able to to knock out that Incineroar most likely at this stage? And does Dina go straight for the fake out or not? Does that Eldegoss Cotton Down come into play yet again, or do we just see a parting shot and a Trick Room to guarantee that position for Dina?
Yeah, exactly, and it seems like we are to be seeing at least a fake out going into that Eldegoss right now. No helping hand, surprisingly, coming out from this turn, so a bit of an adaptation already from Hafidz's side, which doesn't allow the Eldegoss to move at all. But the question is right now, is this Rockfall enough to pick up the KO? Even without the helping hand? No, it is not. So actually, this may be a good but also a bad thing for Dina, because right now the Incineroar, if it does not go down to this chip damage dealt by the Sandstorm, it is going to still be able to get a move off. Maybe it's not the full momentum swing as comparison to game 1 where you could just bring in Calyrex straight away, but it's the fact that you could perhaps threaten with a Flare Blitz as well onto the Solgaleo, because Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't see Weakness Policy proc from the Solgaleo.
We did not, no, and that's a really good point there, Costa. One of the things that you normally have to look out for Solgaleo is that weakness policy, but we've already seen that it's not activated, so Dina can just launch a Flare Blitz, and what's quite good about that is if Dina does launch a Flare Blitz into the Solgaleo, the recoil from Flare Blitz will knock out the Incineroar, and Dina gets effectively a free switch in next turn. In combination with that foul play that Dina has access to as well, if Dina goes after the Solgaleo a little bit earlier than she did before, maybe that's going to be enough to not take as much damage as she did in the first game.
And that was a good amount of damage dealt there because, of course, the Steel Spike boost wasn't already in effect. And the Flare Blitz goes into what was the Eldegoss, is now a Grimmsnarl. So already an adaptation from Hafidz's side with regards to their choice in Pokemon. But Max Steel Spike will be going into that Porygon 2 slot and will be dealing a good amount of damage, even if it is not boosted by any sort of weakness policy plus 2 attack shenanigans. It still is a threat to be reckoned with. As like we were talking about, Ben, Dina does now have that option on bringing in a Trick Room Sweeper. It makes sense as to why Dina chooses Calyrex opposed to Palkia, because of that speed interaction that we saw in that game 1.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important, because Calyrex just needs to get that damage off and start doing a lot of work. But this Grimmsnarl could be a very good adjustment if it's playing the Iron Ball Foul Play sets that we've seen really sort of quite commonly overall, especially more recently. Then the Grimmsnarl could be slower in Trick Room than this Calyrex. Could launch a big Foul Play into Calyrex and do quite a lot of damage. I think the big question for me is, especially since that Solgaleo hasn't taken too much damage, is whether or not Hafidz is going to be happy enough to go for an attack here, or maybe just set up a Reflect, launch a Thunder Wave into Dina's side of the field, or do something else that's just a bit disruptive so that Solgaleo stays on the field for as long as possible.
Yeah, and I was going to say, this could even be a Latian Tail as well, right? Because I think if you do have Latian Tail, you need to try to prioritize focusing down on the option of Dynamax that Dina's going to go for. But no, we're actually just going to see a Reflect. So wanting to further bolster its physical defenses as well as Solgaleo's, as the Porygon 2 is just going to go ahead and quickly get a Recover up, you know, get a bit of a breath with all of these Steel Spikes going into that slot. So we are going to be seeing the Max Hailstorm going into the Grimmsnarl slot. Is this enough to pick up the KO? It is not, Ben, which allows this Grimmsnarl one more turn of being able to utilize its ability, Prankster, within the Trick Room scenario, I would say, but we actually see Max Mindstorm coming out, completely nullifying everything I just said, because if the Grimmsnarl wants to go ahead and at least threaten any Pokemon of Dina's with the Prankster ability, it will no longer be able to do so because of the Psych Terrain. And to be fair, yet another thing that completely nullifies what I said, the hail damage. It's more than enough to actually pick up the KO and awards Hafidz that free switch in right now.
You almost couldn't write that, could you, Costa? There's just everything that went on. We said something, and something happened, and it didn't quite work out exactly as we expected. But that's what VGC can be in a nutshell. Ho-Oh coming out here. The Psychic Terrain is quite interesting, actually, I think, because instead of getting another defense boost, Hafidz has instead decided to increase his damage potential. Using the Reflect to lower damage coming out from Dina's side of the field should be able to mean that it doesn't go down, at least this turn, to a combination of Calyrex's Max Quake and Porygon 2's Foul Play. Yep. What it could do instead is take both of those attacks and launch a Psychic Fangs into the Porygon 2 and potentially pick up the KO from here.
Yeah, I think that would be a route to try to take, and to sort of like wait for the moment if you're Hafidz to get out of Trick Room and maybe force any sort of pressure that you can, as we're going to be seeing Recover from the Porygon 2 yet again, just trying to make sure that it's still on the field. Max Quake goes into that Solgaleo as well, will be dealing super effective damage, not quite enough to pick up a KO, but it will be boosting not only its own, but this Porygon 2's special defense too. But, however, we've got Sacred Fire. Is there a burn this time round?
Yay!
There is a burn. But, and this is a Life Orb Ho-Oh as well, so it deals a lot of damage onto this Calyrex, and also, you know, mitigates any sort of damage output that it originally would be able to go ahead and do and dish out onto Hafidz's Pokemon. As we do see Psychic Fangs in the terrain, dealing respectable amounts of damage onto this Porygon 2 as well.
Indeed, and yeah, that burn's going to be big. It's going to stop the Solgaleo probably from getting knocked out this turn. We know behind, based on what we've seen, that this Solgaleo has never protected itself, unlikely to be able to. And if that's the case, you know, there could be a little bit of a double up coming on here. But I really like how Dina's been playing this Porygon 2. Just instead of letting it get knocked out like she did in the last game, just keeping it sticking around, getting those recovers up on the field, because based on the last game, Dina's Palkia is going to be faster than the Ho-Oh and the Solgaleo on Hafid's side of the field, and so what Dina wants is to come out of Trick Room and outspeed those Pokemon.
And it makes a lot of sense because you got a kind of a dual speed mode to your team, even though you're still majorly running a Trick Room sort of strategy. As we're going to be seeing the Cotton Down, the Foul Play goes into the Eldegoss, procs the Cotton Down ability, which further reduces the speed of both the Calyrex and the Porygon 2, which is quite nice. But what is even nicer is the minimal damage that was unfortunately dealt onto that Eldegoss by this Calyrex. It wasn't even obviously going for the Hailstorm. It was expecting there to just be the Solgaleo on that slot. And we're going to be seeing yet another interaction with Cotton Down. And the burn really paying dividends right now and allowing this Ho-Oh to actually go on the offensive yet again. Sacred Fire, Life Orb boosted, just knocks that Porygon 2 out.
Yeah, and this is a little bit problematic for Hafidz, right? Because now that the Eldegoss has hit the field, there's the Cotton Down effect in play, but Cotton Down seems to have hit everything that Hafidz doesn't want it to hit. The only thing that Hafidz needs that Cotton Down to hit is the Palkia, which has just landed on the field. But to do that, you've got to have Palkia or I suppose Calyrex launch an attack into Eldegoss. So if Dina's clever here and goes for maybe a Trick Room or just targets away from the Eldegoss, then Dina's going to be able to, knock out the Ho-Oh, which Palkia is especially going to outspeed now. Going to be able to knock out the Solgaleo from the health range that it is because of that Life Orb that it's holding that we saw. And then once everything else is knocked out, well, you can just go after Eldegoss then, right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult situation for Hafidz here, and I do think, especially with Dina only having 2 Pokemon in the field, maybe the Eldegoss coming in 1 turn later would have been ideal.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment to make, to be fair, as we are going to be seeing the Calyrex just wanting to be able to position itself and stay on the field, but without Protect. But we're going to be seeing Sleep Powder going into that Palkia slot, actually outspeeding the Palkia as well, as we're going to be seeing the Ho-Oh taking a bit of a script off of Porygon 2's book there, going for a recover of its own, being able to re-heal itself straight back up to 100% of its HP up until the Hail comes into effect.
Okay, that really does change everything there. That Eldegoss going a little bit faster than that Palkia really changes the dynamic of this game. And now Palkia falling asleep is going to has taken a turn of its sleep, so could wake up now, could wake up next turn, could wake up the following turn. But in the meantime, the Ho-Oh does have license to go after the Calyrex. Maybe feels a little bit safer to do so, and probably take the knockout with a Life Orb Sacred Fire here. So good turn there for Hafidz.
Yeah, amazing turn for them. They just want to be able to switch that Solgaleo back in right now, completely utilize and weigh on those sleep turns there. As we are going to be seeing Palkia is still asleep. Sacred Fire is enough to pick up the KO on this Calyrex. Ice Rider, it is out for the count after all of the damage it has dealt in this game too, which unfortunately for Dina leaves them with just the Palkia. So when will this Palkia wake up? Will it be able to, essentially fight off a 3 versus 1 right now? Essentially more of a 2 versus 1, but then you've got to take into consideration that pesky Eldegoss with those sleep powders.
You haven't, anytime you switch the Eldegoss in and they take a Cotton Down comes into effect, it's not going to affect Solgaleo, but it will affect the Ho-Oh, which has already had its speed dropped. So yeah, nice interactions there all over. We see the Psychic Fangs coming out from that Solgaleo, putting a lot of damage onto Palkia, and the Life Orb Brave Bird coming out from that Ho-Oh is enough to pick up the knockout onto the Palkia. Hafidz is going to take game 2, and we're going to take this match to a game 3.
Where we thought that Trick Room was completely reigning over Hafidz's parade, we're just going to be able to see Hafidz fighting back and doing quite well right there, being able to completely utilize the Eldegoss as well as a couple of switches. We saw that they opted for the Grimmsnarl, and Grimmsnarl was essentially just there for one turn, wasn't it? It was just for the reflect, take a bit of damage, essentially be a damage sponge per se. But it was able to do quite enough, I think, in order to allow Hafidz to gain that sort of board state where they were able to get out of Trick Room and completely utilize any sort of offensive pressure and get that burn as well, which was very, very nice. I think Sacred Fire burn was crucial to be able to further minimize any sort of damage output from this Calyrex.
Yeah, massively. I'm not going to say that you can ignore the Calyrex after it's gotten burned, but especially before it gets a boost, you can definitely not worry about it nearly as much.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about the Grimmsnarl as well. I mean, the Urshifu in the first game switched in, took some damage, and then didn't really do anything. The close combat wasn't quite enough to pick up the game at the end of game one.
Yeah.
And so bringing the Grimmsnarl instead, which also switched in and took a bunch of damage, and then reduced damage coming out from Dina's side of the field in game two. It really, even though it was there for one turn, that one turn was much more impactful than the close combat coming out from the Urshifu this time.
Yeah.
Going to be interesting to see how these sort of game plans do manifest themselves as well in game three, because coming in here, we've got the Solgaleo and the Grimmsnarl coming out, a little bit of switch up for Hafidz, and Incineroar and Porygon 2 coming out for Dina. So we could be seeing maybe that Eldegoss not actually coming to this game.
No, and I think it kind of speaks levels of what Hafidz's strategy was. Those with the game 1 and game 2 leads, maybe hoping to get a cheeky sleep powder off would have been the play there. But Hafidz is just well aware right now that Fake Out's probably always going to be going into that slot. Might as well bring Grimmsnarl and get some sort of pressure going once the Trick Room's been set up. So I do really like the adaptation, and there is the Fake Out yet again. And no Dynamax though.
No Dynamax at all. Oh, Incineroar avoiding that Stone Edge. Trick Room getting set up, but I think it's massive, really, that the Solgaleo did not go for the max that turn. Unfortunately for Hafidz, that Stone Edge would have done a lot of damage to Incineroar and put a lot of pressure on. We'll have to see what set this Grimmsnarl is, because if it's just going to carry Reflect, that's great for turn one, and certainly something that you'd want to see from Hafid's side of the field. You'd want to get that physical defense raised up really as early as possible. For Dina, that's going to mean the opportunity to maybe get a little bit of pivoting action going, getting another Flare Blitz into the Solgaleo now that you have a little bit more HP to do so. But the thing I'm most curious about is how this Porygon 2 gets played in this game 3 with Dina, because we saw in game 1 it got knocked out really quickly. We saw in game 2 it recovered a lot. Now we'll see which one was most impactful as we start playing this match.
Oh, as we're going to be seeing a light screen as opposed to a reflect coming out for this turn 2 from Hafidz's side. Foul play goes into the Solgaleo, is able to deal good damage, escorted by even better damage of this Flare Blitz from the Incineroar. Already a very different game then, as the Max Rockfall coming out from this less than half HP's worth of a Dynamax Solgaleo is actually enough to pick up the KO, unless my eyes were playing games on me there. That may have actually been a roll scenario in game 2 where Incineroar wasn't actually knocked out. But we've got a situation where, yes, okay, Incineroar's gone within the first couple of turns, right? But the problem is, there has been so much damage dealt onto this Solgaleo, which is so much more of a different game right now in favor of Dina's strategy.
Yeah, you mentioned in game 1 that Palkia might be a better max option for Dina to go for in these sort of situations, and I'm really thinking that now with the amount of damage that's come out onto Hafid's side of the field, that Palkia could be the way that Dina goes in that match and leaves this Calyrex going for its normal high horsepower, because as you said, Costa, so much damage coming out onto this Solgaleo already. But no, we see the Calyrex is going to be going for the max itself, as it had done in the previous 2 games.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because once again, you want your main Trick Room juggernaut of a, like Wall Breaker to gain advantage of that Dynamax and just go for the damage, have double the bulk. It just makes so much sense, as we are gonna actually now see the Reflect coming out from Hafid's side. So we've got a couple of revealing of the move slot of what kind of Grimmsnarl this is. It makes a lot of sense. You want a lot of bulk, especially with a potential AV Solgaleo, since we haven't seen a max guard as of yet. The max quake is not enough to pick up the KO onto this Solgaleo. The reflect already paying dividends, but the question is, can this foul play finish off the job? And it can!
Yes, okay. Yeah, that foul play massive, actually. Wasn't sure there. I think it could have been a little bit on the fence there as to whether that foul play was going to be able to pick up the knockout, but it did in this game, and the sand damage is only the only damage that Dina's going to take in this game. And yeah, now Dina's in a position where you've got a max counter X. Okay, Hafidz has got the reflect up, they've got the light screen up, they've probably got the Ho-Oh in the back that could suppress this Calyrex with a Sacred Fire. But you know, it's really going to be uphill now that Dina has another 2 turns of max left for this Calyrex, and there's no max on Hafid's side of the field to stand up in front of it now and really take those hits. So yeah, Hafidz really going to have to have something special in the back there from this Grimmsnarl. As it stands, it's the trick here, swapping away that Babiri Berry and giving it a lagging tail. Not going to go into effect this turn. Max Hailstorm coming out next. Ho-Oh taking really respectable damage there, but from now on, the Calyrex is going to be going last.
Yeah, it definitely will, and what a reveal as well of that lagging tail. I think Hafidz could have maybe prioritized it a turn earlier, but then getting double screens up makes a lot of sense for the general bulk of your Pokemon, as we're going to be seeing Ho-Oh is not down for the count, but it's able to go ahead and get a bit of a burn onto that Porygon 2, which you're thinking, oh, okay, that's not going to affect Porygon 2. No, you're mistaken. It will affect its foul play. It will reduce its damage output by half. Of course, it is still a physical move. But Ho-Oh is actually still in play right now, even with the small amount of HP it has left. Calyrex now carrying that lagging tail is always going to be moving last within a neutral priority bracket.
It is, and that's quite big actually, because it does mean that if Porygon picks up the KO on this Ho-Oh with the foul play, it's then a question mark as to whether this Grimmsnarl with the reflect up is going to be knocked out from the max Hailstorm. Of course, Ho-Oh having that regenerator ability is going to be able to swap out into the Eldegoss and take some damage here. Porygon going for the recover, Dina not falling for it whatsoever, just making sure that Porygon 2 is more than healthy. Foul play coming up into this Calyrex, doing pretty respectable damage overall, but this max Hailstorm coming out onto the field is going to be targeting down that Eldegoss and picking up the knockout.
And it makes a lot of sense going for Hailstorm into that slot. You have pretty much zero drawback from that, and you can pick up any sort of cheeky switch-in that you would expect coming up from Hafidz's side in anticipation of, like you said, Ben, that regenerator ability on the Ho-Oh. And as a result of that, of course, we're going to be getting the +1 in attack for this Calyrex Ice Rider due to that Chilling Neigh ability. So, foul play is going to be quite bad for Calyrex right now, because I think the Dynamax turns are pretty much ending if they haven't already ended this turn, which may mean that it is going to be subject to getting KO'd.
Yeah, and you know, that lagging tail does mean that the Cotton Down ability isn't going to be really that impactful. The Ho-Oh is going to be able to attack before the Porygon 2 and the Calyrex, and as you said earlier, cost of the Porygon 2's foul play damage has been reduced by that burn. So, you know, Hafidz has some options here with the way that they can play the game, but you know, there's always that Palkia in the back, and especially with Grimmsnarl launching out a foul play, that probably means that it doesn't have access to Spirit Break.
Yep.
And if that's the case, we've already seen both screens, we've already seen foul play, we've seen trick, so we know that there's no speed control options that the Grimmsnarl has to slow down that Palkia. The only thing that Grimmsnarl can do really is to, you know, take away the life orb from Palkia and make it do just that little bit less damage. But in the meantime, you know, you've got to keep yourself healthy, especially with this recover coming out from Ho-Oh, while that +1 Calyrex is really putting a lot of pressure on.
Well, yeah, and talking about pressure, it is gone. It is out for the count in this Game 3 as well. Recover makes a lot of sense on the Ho-Oh foul play. like we spoke and you just mentioned, not going to be able to deal a lot of damage at all onto this Ho-Oh. And I'm quite interested. It makes sense that the Porygon 2 doesn't want to go for the Trick Room, because we all know that Palkia is in the back and it's about to bless us with its presence in this on the battlefield right now. As Light Screen, it has now worn off, so Hafidz may be tempted to try to set another one up, but it's going to be quite tough, and I think it may come down to whether a Hydro Pump may land or miss onto this Ho-Oh then.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, Hydro Pump isn't the most accurate of moves. There's still a really good chance that Hydro Pump does hit. I suppose the other question, because Ho-Oh is so specially defensive, it does have that Protect as well as an option to protect itself just that little bit further, get a little bit of shenanigans going off with that Grimmsnarl. But without that Life Orb, would the Hydro Pump be enough to knock out the Ho-Oh from this range, especially given that Reflect and Light Screen are still in play at the moment?
Yeah, and we saw the double up into Hafidz's Ho-Oh, and I do really like the reveal of the Protect there. I'm not sure we had actually revealed it as of yet. And we saw the very nice play of taking away the Life Orb from the Palkia, saying, no, 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 this isn't yours anymore. I do not want you to be dealing as much damage as you have been. Please allow my Ho-Oh a chance to survive. And I do quite like it, but we do have to take into consideration that Hydro Pump from a Palkia, you know, same type attack bonus, is so, so powerful, even though Ho-Oh is well renowned to be especially defensively bulky.
Yeah, and you know, that Light Screen going back onto the field from Grimmsnarl, so the Protect really vital for being able to deal with that. The Palkia Hydro Pump coming out onto the Ho-Oh, we'll see. This is crunch time here. The Ho-Oh does manage to survive. He's going to go for the recover. Going to take a little bit of damage from the foul play, most likely from the Porygon 2. And really, the question is here, is Hydro Pump going to hit or is it going to miss? Because, you know, it's a good chance that it's going to hit once if you only use the move once, but the more you use it, the more chances there are for one of the Hydro Pumps to miss, and then we get a situation where Ho-Oh's got a pretty much free recover and it can start going on the offensive potentially.
Yeah, exactly that, and I think in this scenario, we may even see a passive Protect right now from the Ho-Oh, maybe to try to deal any sort of damage that can be dealt onto Palkia, but no Protects, and a Hydro Pump does connect, and it goes into that Ho-Oh, and that is a very, very soaked bird that is also knocked out of this Game 3, and it looks like Dina may be winning this, but let's see if that will be the case. Foul play does respectable amounts of damage due to that Life Orb further bolstering its damage output onto that Palkia, as Porygon 2 will now be going for the Trick Room, and I think this is already tough for Hafidz. I'm trying to think of a scenario that they may have an out to this, because the only damaging move that we have from the Porygon 2 is a foul play, which is halved by the burn, as well as not very effective on this Grimmsnarl.
The problem that Hafidz has now is that trick really is working against Hafidz. No, it's doing good damage to the Palkia with the foul play, and it's making that sort of viable to maybe knock out the Palkia if Palkia goes and misses all of its turns. But unfortunately, every time that Grimmsnarl would attack, it would take 10% damage. And so, you know, eventually it would knock itself out. The Porygon 2 would just sit there recovering, and Hafidz knows that, does go for the forfeit, and Dina takes the set 2-1 for Egypt.
Yeah, and being able to go ahead and give Egypt that first win versus Indonesia, the score right now, the overall score being 5-1. And what a way to see Dina go ahead and be able to be quite successful with that. We did discuss a bit about that Game 3 changeup from Hafidz's side, opting to bring Grimmsnarl straight off the bat, seeing how well it paid dividends in Game 2, saying, oh, okay, you know what? Might actually go for it, given Eldegoss is just pretty much useless, subject to fake out, of course, following the Game 1 and Game 2 leads, but then set up the Light Screen, which was a bit strange initially, and not a Reflect to, you know, sort of reduce the damage output coming out from both the Flare Blitz and the foul play from the P2. So, and I think the fact that, and we touched on it already a couple of times, Solgaleo took so much damage and didn't even pick up a KO, didn't Dynamax that turn 1 of Game 3, and it just proved to be a bit too much for Hafidz with regards to losing their resources up against Dina's Trick Room.
Yeah, that was absolutely the key to Hafidz. If if Hafidz wanted to get through that game, Solgaleo was going to need to be front and center, taking knockouts, boosting defenses, making sure it was still there at the end of Trick Room, and being able to just be a really strong offensive presence. But as it turned out, the Ho-Oh did quite a lot of work in the back, but it wasn't the Pokemon that was really going to be front and center doing all of the work. And yeah, Solgaleo taking all of that damage in the early game really stopped it from doing that in game 3. I really like the adjustment from Grimmsnarl, though. I mean, that bringing that was fantastic, both in game 2 and, game 3. I think if Hafidz had gone for those sort of maybe a Max Steel Spike straight off the bat kind of thing, plus that Reflect could have been really, really strong for Hafidz, just making sure it stayed on the field. But Dina able to play the set really well, clearly very experienced with playing that Calyrex Ice Rider Palkia team, taking the first win for Egypt, as you mentioned earlier, Costa, and securing the first set of points for Egypt going forward.
Yep, exactly that. And what a way to start off our first stream match of the day. Of course, this was just one of 4. What we will be doing, ladies and gents, at home is we'll be cutting to a very short break, and we will be coming back featuring the next match, which is going to be Rowan Hall of India versus Fernando Castillo of Panama. Don't go anywhere. Get your snacks. I will be right back.